Well, you better be because we are starting. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Designated Players Podcast. I think we're on 190 now, aren't we? We are
Unless somebody
190.
did their research ahead of time.
Yeah,
That's a
190.
first.
And it's playoffs time, baby. And you can tell there's a bit of enjoyment in my voice because
You sound overjoyed.
for the 14th year in a row, the greatest team on turf, the New York Red Bulls, have qualified for the playoffs on the last day with a 94th minute penalty from John Tolkien. If that's the last thing he does as a Red Bull, I thank him for it. I know he'll get some time in the playoffs, of course, but it is time for us to make predictions. Before we go into predictions, before we go into how the playoffs are structured this year and la da 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 da, we need to show off some scarves. And Connor, I'm going to go first because it's the only one that really matters. We're rocking the New York Red Bull scarf once again. This time it's a Christmas celebration theme because, as you know, we are super, super hyped.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you went with that. Sure. I think you just wanted to keep the mystery of the teams that are actually going to make the real playoffs. So I respect that. I have gone with maybe a spoiler, maybe not a spoiler. Figured I hadn't taken it out in a while, so I got the Orlando scarf. Not going to say anything else on that one. You'll have to find out if that has any meaning in this episode.
Mine has tons of
It
meaning.
has no meaning.
It does because Red Bull are just 6 games away from their first piece of silverware. That's all I'm saying.
Too bad that's not happening.
I think you're throwing spoilers out there.
I'll spoil it, right? I'll spoil the Red Bull result. That's not much of a spoiler.
We are going to fill out our bracket challenge. And for those of you listening, and we'll post it on Twitter, we're going to create our very own bracket league. So you guys can join up and compete against us to see who has the best ball knowledge as it comes to MLS playoffs, which, spoiler, I'll let you know if you guys don't put Red Bull as the winner, you don't really have too much ball knowledge, but that's okay. But we're going to go fill out our bracket as we see it. We're going to talk about why we're putting teams where they are. And we're just going to go on and Connor apparently has prepped something. I don't believe any of that because he doesn't prep anything ever. So I'm thinking I'm just going to go off vibes and standings. And then a little bit of just playoff magic. And I think Connor is going to do something silly. So don't listen to anything he has to say.
I mean, who won the predictions battle in this year?
Sorry,
It was
predictions
me.
battle is not over. Thank you very much.
The game by game predictions battle is
Yeah,
done.
not over. Not over.
It is.
No, it's not because we still have playoffs to go, and I'm only six.
Oh, you mean the part of the competition that you say is less valuable. So I've won
Correct,
the
it is.
valuable
But
one.
in the process of
Just looking to keep yourself alive, aren't you? Because you know
quiet
you
down,
lost.
quiet down. You know what? Quiet down. I don't need this. So we've got our scarf for the week out of the way. First, I want to go through what the playoffs are going to look like this year. So the schedule is as such. On Wednesday and Thursday of this week, wild card matches are going to happen. So the 25th and 26th. That is Red Bull versus Charlotte and Kansas City versus San Jose. After that's done, the weekend after, October 28th to November 12th, best of 3 series matches for round 1. So the 8 matchups on either side of the bracket, or 4 matchups on either side, 8 total, will go into a best of 3 series. Winner of 2 games will move on and do that. We'll talk about how all of these games are going to be played in a second here. But once that's done, the semifinals will take place on November 5th to December 3rd. Rephrase, semifinals and finals, November 25th to December 3rd. And then MLS Cup is taking place on December 9th. So let's talk really quickly about what this is going to look like. So you've got the wild card matches. There are single elimination matches hosted by the higher seed. That would be Red Bull and that would be Sporting Kansas City, funny enough. The team that we had picked basically to be dead in the water at midway break is hosting a playoff match, which is similar to what Red Bull did, right? If the score of this wild card game is tied at the end of regulation, no extra time played, straight to penalty kicks, much like Leagues Cup. The winner of each match will advance to play against the number 1 seed. So Red Bull or Charlotte will go to play Cincy. KC or San Jose will play St. Louis. In that round 1 best of 3 series, every game has a winner. There are no ties and there are no aggregate scores. So as we mentioned, it is the first to 2 wins. It's a home away home format for the higher seed. So the higher seed hosts the first game, lower seed gets the second game, higher seed hosts the third game. If a match is tied at the end of regulation, once again, no extra time played, straight to penalty kicks to determine the winner. It is very Leagues Cup-esque, which I think is really fun. We'll talk about what our thoughts are in a second on that. First team for two advance, and 4 teams from each conference will go to the semifinals, of course. In the single elimination games, to my knowledge, there are no reseedings. So the winner of 1 versus 9 is going to play the winner of the 4-5 series. Winner of 3 versus 6 is going to play the winner of the 2-7 series. So there's no reseeding and high-low, whatever. It's just going to be the way it is in the bracket. So, for example, when Red Bull beats Charlotte, they're going to play Cincy. When they beat Cincy, they're going to play the winner of Philly, New England. It doesn't matter what the seeding is. Then the winners of those matches, of course, go to the conference final, which is now a single elimination match. So the semifinal and the final both go to single elimination matches hosted by the higher seed. Once again, if the score is tied in this game in the conference final, it does go to extra time. 2 15-minute periods played in their entirety. If the score is still tied, then we go to penalty kicks. So at the conference final, we remove the just a penalty kicks portion and go back to a normal overtime, extra time period. Then we get to MLS Cup presented by Audi, where it is a single match hosted by the higher seed. If the score of the game is tied at the end of regulation, extra time. And once extra time is done, it is penalty kicks if it's still tied. As we know, no game with Red Bull is going to go that far because they're just going to win everything in normal time. But I do want to know what you think about this setup. A little bit confusing, sure. But are you excited?
Let me tell you something about this league and confusing. Confusing is what we do best. I was at the NYC game last night, and the amount of times I heard people talking around me because they couldn't figure out how the tiebreakers worked in the standings. Everybody was throwing around different ideas. I heard clean sheets. I heard goal difference. Nobody had the right idea down. And I didn't correct anybody because I didn't want to be that guy that's like, actually.
You're a podcast host for an MLS podcast. You absolutely will be correcting people. How dare you?
I did not
That's
correct
disappointing.
anybody.
Write it down. Strike 15,427 on Connor and why he should be kicked off the pod.
But yes, the playoff format I definitely think is confusing, but I think I'm in the minority here when I say that I do like the format. I don't like how many teams get in. I wish we kind of cut it off at 8. I think 8 has to be the sweet spot for teams to get in, just because
per conference or per the league?
Per conference, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Just because I think 4 per conference is too little, and I think if you do 6 or 7, then it creates like weird situations with bye rounds, which I think has hurt 1 seeds from what we've seen in the past rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's necessarily fair to them. So I think 8 is a good sweet spot, and this is basically 8, which is a play-in game for that 8 seed. I wish it was cut down, but I think so. I think I'm in the minority when I say that I like the round of 3 or the best of 3 for the first round, because I feel like it will change situations where, let's say, like Red Bull get a fluke win, right? And then there's still
No
a
such
chance
thing
for the better team to turn that around and win 2 more games and knock Red Bull out, as opposed to a one-off game where Red Bull win and now they're in the next round of the playoffs, and the truly better team got knocked out. I guess that comes down to your preference on, what do you weigh more importance on? Like, would you rather see the better teams move on? Do you want to see something more exciting where some upsets will happen? I mean, I guess it's a personal preference for me that I'd rather see the better teams move on and play each other for the title, as opposed to like the 7 seed got hot at the playoffs and now they're the champions. So I don't mind the best of three. I think it'll put more of the better teams into the next round, and then from there on, it's just single elimination. So it's pretty standard from there. It's just, I mean, I guess if it's a collection of the better teams, then single elimination is less of a obstacle, I'll say, in terms of like finding the best teams to get into the final to play each other. So I I would say overall I'm okay with the playoff structure. I think there could be some work done on it though.
I can be honest with you. I'm actually really excited for this. So I hear this all the time about how too many teams get in. And I don't disagree like wholeheartedly. Like it feels like it's a lot. Like Red Bull shouldn't be in. They're a garbage team. They shouldn't be where they are. Like I'm not arguing that. But if you look at it, right, to me, and this is probably a hot take, and I'm okay with that. Because it's a playoff series, having more teams in it, it is what it is, right? If we were doing a promotion relegation setup, what are we? We're at 30 teams. If we were to even do 2 from each conference that were to go down, 26 of the 30 teams are in the playoffs for the next year, right? If you look at it that way, that's always been the way I look at it, is like the way that we set it up. Yes, a lot of teams get into the playoffs, but it's a lot less than the teams that come back and play the next year in other conferences. And I know it's not a direct correlation. I'm not trying to make it that way, but you're always going to see new teams in there. It's not always going to be the same groups of teams, outside of this, 1 or 2 that are constantly either at the bottom or at the top, but it's always going to be same different teams mixed in. I'm okay with the number. And I think you're right. I think 8 is a sweet spot, especially when we get to 32. If we were to get to 32 and 8's a sweet spot, 16 in each, cut it right in half. I'm totally okay with that. Right now, we're, with the 9 out of 14, it feels a little rough. 9 out of 15 is basically half. So I'm not too disappointed by that. But I agree with you in the sense that best of 3 series, I'm actually really excited for. The one thing that I really miss from the old playoff series is that home and away format. Like you go in, then no aggregate, no ties, whatever. I don't really care about that. But in the past, when it was like, okay, we lost the first game, or we tied the first game, we should have won it, and now we're going back home in front of our fans to see if we can win this out. Those were always the most fun because you knew there was one more to go, and you never knew what was going to happen, right? I loved that, and that is what I'm excited to see here. The little home away, and then even again home. I think he could have done best, a home and away aggregate thing, and still gotten away with, adding more meaningful games as they tried to back it. But I do enjoy the fact they are doing a home and away thing. My favorite part about it is no extra time for the first couple of rounds. I loved the way that Leagues Cup did straight to penalties. It was just electric. It was exciting, and it prevented the unnecessary extra 30 minutes on these guys' legs. It's going to be in a tight. I mean, like I said, we're starting in October 25th. December 9th is the last game. You've got a week off between round 1 and the conference semis. It's a lot of games in a short amount of time. So you're limiting the amount of minutes on their legs. Great. Awesome. I like it. I'm always a fan of something different and unique. And I think when they first brought it out, everybody's like, oh my God, it's so confusing. I don't know. But when you really break it down, it's not that confusing. It's one of the rounds is a best of 3 series. Everything else is the same way it used to be. So I'm not super disappointed. And I don't care about the number either. I think the number of teams is fine. Like I said, as you continue to keep an eye on your European leagues, especially the one that everybody likes to talk about, they keep adding these random European competitions for more teams to have something to play for. So if your argument is they only put more playoff spots so teams have more things to play for, Well, your argument's dead in the water because that's exactly what they did with what is it now? The Conference League? Is that what it's called over there? Where
Mhm.
like the seventh place team. I think somebody used the argument like at the like max number, like 11 teams from the Premier League can get into an international competition at the end of the year. So more than half the teams are getting international. Like that's exactly what we're doing here. I don't know. I think it's a lazy take for people who are like, oh, playoffs are just a lazy way to do things. I don't. Now I'm rambling, but you know what I mean.
No, I feel like those people still kind of have like the stand on right now. Is I mean, realistically, it's probably about 7 teams in the Prem will make it out of 20. That's about 35% of teams. We'll call it playing in like a European playoff versus MLS right now, who's got 9 from each conference out of 29 teams. That's 62% of teams make the playoff. So there's still a pretty big gap there. I
No,
think
and I don't disagree. Like I said, but we're different, right? Because the other thing that other teams are playing for is simple survival. So you've got you that's the difference where you need to have more of it to play for. Otherwise, you do have a trying to think of the right phrase is. You can definitely argue if we didn't have 8 and 9 to play for, that a lot of what we're doing doesn't make sense because 3/4 of the way through the year, most teams wouldn't be playing for something if we only did like the top 5 of 15, right? Because there's nothing at the bottom to play for. So to increase that increases the ability to play for something. And it's the same thing that happens, or it just gives you reason to play games. Everyone's like, oh, games don't matter. Like games definitely matter. They just matter in different ways. You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess I just think it shifts who has the importance on the games, really.
Correct.
Because if you just no, but I'm saying like even if you cut it down to top 5, make it like yes, the Minnesotas and the NYCs get knocked out earlier and they have nothing to play for. But you can kind of make the same argument that when like Columbus, Orlando, Philly lock it in the playoffs, like 3 games ahead of the end of the year, that there's really not a ton for them to play for anymore unless they want like home field
Well, of
or
course,
like trying
and
to
that's
figure
what you're
out what
playing.
matchup.
Well, that's what you're playing for. Is you're playing for home field event. You're playing to play in front of your home crowd. It has impact. Every game will have an impact unless you're absolutely out of the playoffs, and even then you can still play a you know spoiler, right? So I don't know. We're getting a little bit off topic here, but um, I'm okay with the playoff format. I really like the straight to penalties. I'm excited for the best of three. I'd be interested to see how it works out. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's too complicated. I think it's a pretty good setup.
I agree.
Cool. All right. So we should just go straight into it then and talk. We'll do East and West play-in games first. So let's start in the West because that seems like it makes the most sense. So in the West, Sporting Kansas City at home against San Jose, who has fallen from the ranks, barely sneaking in. Wasn't that your prediction that they were going to make the playoffs this year?
Yep.
And they barely snuck in by the skin of their teeth.
Right prediction's a right prediction.
Yeah, that's what they all say. Kansas City is going to host after winning the tiebreaker on most wins. They are 9-6-2 at home, whereas San Jose is 2-8-7 away from home. You said you did a lot of prep on here, so talk to me about your preparation here. What do you think?
I mean, the numbers scream SKC's winning this game. It's based, I mean, home record is strong for SKC, away record is weak for San Jose. SKC's form coming into the playoffs is much better than San Jose's. Head to head, they were dead even. Both teams had a 3-0 win at home against each other. But I just think SKC got healthier. The team's starting to click a bit more, and it shows it in the form. I think the form is the biggest thing driving for me in making the decision that I think SKC wins this game and is the 8th seed to face St. Louis. I think the home record definitely helps. They're not dominant at home. They're certainly beatable, but San Jose getting 2 wins on the road all year is brutal. Does not bode well for them going in and getting a win here. So I'm back in SKC to get the playing game.
I am leaning that way as well for the exact same reasons that you have, right? 4 wins in their last 6 versus San Jose's win and 4 draws. I think they're both in decent form, but Kansas City are finding ways to win games, and they're doing it at home, which is even more important in the one-off game where you are looking at this win or go home scenario. You're looking for a team that can get it done at home versus on the road. Kansas City can do that. And the other thing that I'll say is Kansas City have this guy, Alan Polito, who is just absolutely on fire. 7th in the Golden Boot rankings with 14 goals. San Jose's top goal scorer, if I remember correctly, is Espinoza, who has 13, and Jeremy Bobasi has 10. So they have players who can score, but it's 2. And if you can lock them up, you're in good shape. And I think that San Jose can do that. I'm trying to see really quickly a list of the last couple of games he's played. So Espinoza, we talked about, he's got 13 goals, 8 assists. However, he's got 1 in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1 goal and 3 assists in his last 10. And that 1 goal came on the last day against Austin to get them into the playoffs. So, and actually, if we take that back even further, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, he had, and he does it in bursts, right? So he started off the year 1 goal, 2 assists in 3 games. Then he had a little pocket where he had 7 goals and an assist over 6 games. Then he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 without doing anything, 8 without doing anything, excuse me. And then he went 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4 goals, 2 assists in a span of 6 games, and then went 4 games without doing nothing. And then he went those 10 games with only 1 goal. So he's very, very streaky because teams are finding ways to shut him down. I don't think he really will step up in this one-off game because he needs to get into a rhythm. So I'm going with Kansas City as well.
Glad we're in
But
agreement.
the real question is, how are you going to mess up? How are you going to mess this one up here for the Eastern Conference? Red Bull hosting Charlotte FC.
Unfortunately, I'm not going to mess this one up, as much as it pains me to say it.
Eh.
But I do have Red Bull winning the play-in game as well.
Yeah, you do.
Your home record is not great, but
Doesn't
Charlotte's
need
away
to.
record is also not great. 7-5-5 at home for Red Bull, 4-8-5 away for Charlotte. Form is definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely better. Charlotte's in decent form coming in as well, but Red Bull's got 4 wins, 1 loss coming in their last 5. Charlotte's got 3 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss.
And 3 of the last 3, by the way. Should be 5 out of 5 if we didn't poop the bed against Chicago,
But you did.
we did.
The head-to-head this year for Red Bull and Charlotte has been dead even. Both games were draws. 1-1 at Charlotte and 2-2 at Red Bull. So there's really not a ton separating the teams. So while I don't think Red Bull is a fortress at home, I think there's the slight advantage from having the home game compared to what Charlotte has been capable of doing on the road this season. And I think that slight advantage just gives you enough to get through the play-in game and be the 8 seed playing FCC. I also think if it goes to penalties that you guys have the advantage because I think Cornell will be the better goalkeeper in penalties.
Yeah. Obviously, it would be a cardinal sin not to put my boys through. The one thing that I will say outside of like homerism, right? I want them to move on, do what they got to do. I have seen very on Twitter the common phrase amongst the Charlotte supporters are this team will go as far as Swiderski takes them. He's got 12 goals this year. and in this run, getting them into the playoffs and clawing back some points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals and an assist over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. He didn't score against Inter Miami in either of those 2 games. Oh, I'm sorry. That included some international games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 goals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. And then the 2 after the international break, where he only played 25 and 75 minutes. So I think Andres Reyes and Sean Nealis can lock him down, as well as John Tolkien, because he kind of drifts out to that side sometimes. I think those 3 will lock him down no problem. And I do think that while our attack will probably not get a ton done, they have been decent over the last couple of games. I agree with you. I think we win this on penalties. I think we move on penalties. So that's my prediction.
Too much agreement. We need to start
So
disagreeing.
where do you want to go with this then? You want to go west first? You want to go east first? And we're going to fill it out live. So you'll
Let's
hear
go
our
west
thought
first.
processes. Boring. St. Louis, and this is now for both of us. St. Louis is going to take on Sporting Kansas City in a home away and home setup. How do you think they will fare? I'll let you go first.
I think this is going to be a bit closer than people are going to expect. So, home away record for St. Louis this season 11-4-2 at home, 6-8-3 away. So, pretty strong at home, but, it's not unbeatable to beat St. Louis there. Away record is weaker than I had originally thought it was going to be. 6-8-3 is not what I would have expected out of the number 1 seed in the West. SKC are 9-6-2 at home, definitely beatable there, but still pretty strong. And 3-8-6 on the road, definitely pretty weak on the road. Form coming in, we talked about SKC already. So St. Louis is 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw coming in. And one of those wins is a win against SKC. So head to head this season, they have 4-0 win for St. Louis in St. Louis. SKC won 2-1, I think, in SKC. And then St. Louis won 4-1 at home. So when St. Louis is at home against SKC, they've rocked them this season. And I think that's going to really be the difference maker here. So I think having 2 home games in this series is going to be what puts St. Louis through. I'm a little bit worried about how St. Louis is going to do in the playoffs this year, because I feel like we've seen a number of times where teams look really strong in the regular season, then they get to the playoffs and kind of fall apart. And the St. Louis team, while some guys definitely have playoff experience, as a team, they have none so far. Never played a playoff game together. So I don't know what to expect from them in that regard. However, I think the 2 home games still, with the St. Louis crowd playing, or them playing in front of the St. Louis crowd for their first ever playoff game, I think there's going to be a lot of hype and motivation. I think it will definitely carry them to, in my opinion, a 2-1 series win for them. I think all teams win their home games in this one.
I like that, because that's kind of the way I was going with it too. I think it's close, like you mentioned. I think it's close, where I think at least one of those games is going to penalties, because Casey's going to come out, and especially away from home, they're just going to sit in that low block and try and absorb as much as they can, maybe get a counter. Because as you mentioned, only 3 wins on the road all season versus the 11 at St. Louis's home. I think that they are going to, Peter Vermees is going to game plan better than Bradley Carnell will. And I think he's going to invite that Bradley Carnell press to say, hey, come and try and get the ball off us. Set it back to Tim Melia, hit that thing long, flick it on by anybody, and try and run onto the second ball. That being said, I do think St. Louis will have early success in the first game. Vermees will figure it out. The second game, I think KC will take it at home. Again, 9 wins. They'll make that 10. The third game, I think, goes to penalties, and I think St. Louis moves on.
I mean, if it goes to penalties, I definitely back St. Louis. There's been no better goalkeeper this season than Roman Berkey. So good luck getting them past Roman Berkey.
Do you want to continue in the West, or do you want to go across and do kind of like a Z formation?
No, let's knock out the West and then we'll go to the East.
All right, so we're looking then at Houston versus RSL. A little background here. Houston in 4th spot with 51 points. They are 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss in their last 6 versus RSL in 5th with 50 points, who are 3 wins, 2 losses, and a draw in their last 6. I am all aboard Benny Ball hype train. I think he's got them playing out of their mind. He's also, and again, we'll talk home form. 11 wins at home versus 3 on the road, versus an RSL who's actually better on the road than they are at home. Key players, of course, Chicharanjo in RSL. At Houston, Coco Carrasquilla and Ache in the midfield run that show. It is going to be a really close. It's going to be a 4 versus 5 matchup, no doubt about it. You've got Pamine Pasi with 10 goals, Corey Baird with 8, and then Ache with 4 goals, 11 assists, and that's only first assist for WhoScored.com, where we also look here at RSL, who have their top goal scorer being Jefferson Savarino with Chicharanjo with 6 goals in 11 games. 750 minutes, 6 goals. Dude is on fire, but they don't really have a big goal scorer. So I expect this to be close. 1-0, 2-1 games. But with Houston's ability to be so good at home, even though RSL are good on the road, I have Houston winning games 1 and 3. I have RSL winning game 2. So I have Houston moving on.
I think you nailed it right on the head. And this being
Naturally
a 4-5 and being super close, because I think there are arguments to be made in both directions. Like you had mentioned, RSL, not great at home, but very strong road team. And Houston, quite the opposite. Super strong home team, pretty bad away team. And form coming into, first of all, I do want to say, who picks 6 games as the form going into the playoffs? Why not just pick like 5 like a normal person? Why do
that would be WhoScored.com.
Okay.
Who is giving these 6 games?
I will forward the complaint to Who Scored.
Yeah. Forward it to somebody who cares.
I took everything 5 games because I went based off the Athletic. But anyway, form coming in, both of them are in pretty okay form. I think RSL's is a bit better, but the thing for me is Houston really has not played tough games going into this. They played, the highest seed team they played was 7 in Dallas. And then they also played SKC, who's the 8th seed, but then the rest were all non-playoff teams. And in those 5 games, they managed a 2 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. It's not the best record. I would expect a bit more when you're the 4 seed playing against teams that are much lower than you in the standings. RSL definitely had some bad results in their form as well. A draw against the Galaxy is not great. They also lost to SKC. Both teams actually lost to SKC, funny enough. But a couple of good wins in there against LAFC and Vancouver, I think, give me a little positive in terms of RSL. But then you look at the head-to-head, and Houston has owned RSL this season. It was 0-0 in the home game at Houston to start the season, and then Houston won 3-0 at RSL. And then the teams played again in the US Open Cup, where Houston won 3-1. So Houston's really had their number this year. And you could definitely make the argument that it should be Houston based off of that. You can make the argument it should be RSL based off of form. So it's really going to be as tight as you were talking about. I have gone for RSL in this one. I think they will win 2-1 in the series because I actually like that they're super strong away. And considering they are going to play 2 of the 3 games away in the series, I think they can get I think they could sneak a win in one of those 2 home games and hold it down at home themselves, considering how bad Houston's been on the road this year. So, considering that, I think they just sneaked through past Houston. Plus, I almost forgot this note, but Houston has made the playoff, including this season, has made the playoffs twice in the last decade versus RSL, who's consistently been in the playoffs. That to me makes me feel a little bit more confident in RSL, considering a lot of these guys have been here. They know how to play together in the playoffs. Whereas Houston, I think the last time they made the playoffs was like 2017. So I would say majority, if not all of these guys, really don't know how to play with one another in the playoffs. I think, obviously you can bring some chemistry in from the regular season, but I think there's a different type of pressure when it comes to playing in a playoff game together.
I was real close to going RSL here, but you actually brought up the point that gave me uh, the reason why I picked Houston, and I think you did at least, is that they played in the U.S. Open Cup semifinal, and Houston had their number, and they did it. There was a red card involved to give them the third goal, but they did it in extra time. They found a way to win, and they absolutely demolished them. By the way, RSL had 2 shots on target to Houston's 10. Possession was 70-30. Passes were double for Houston what they were for RSL. I mean, absolutely dominated them. They find ways to win, and that shows in their um, Open Cup title, right? They find ways to win. It's a Benny Ball special. Big fans of theirs, and I think they move on past RSL. I'll send it back over to you then as we move on to LAFC versus Vancouver. What are you thinking?
It's another good matchup.
Yeah.
So home and away for LAFC, 10-4-3 at home, very strong. But again, 4 losses this season at home. They are beatable there. 4-6-7 on the road, not great. Vancouver, on the other hand, 8-3-6 at home. Don't lose much, but not a ton of wins at home either. And then 4-7-6 on the road. So home and away is relatively similar between the two sides. LAFC's home record's a little bit stronger, and considering they have 2 home games, I would say that's definitely a bit of an advantage for them. Form coming in, Vancouver hasn't lost in their last 5, but then again, they really haven't won much either. They are 1 win, 0 losses, 4 draws. Against some tough opponents, I'll admit. They got a good win against St. Louis, draws against LAFC, Seattle, DC, and Colorado. LAFC are 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. So a couple more wins, 1 extra loss in there. But I think the important thing in the form is finding ways to win because, there's not draws in the playoffs. So you got to find ways to win. I think that, again, gives a little bit of an advantage to LAFC. Granted, their wins were against non-playoff teams, and they had a loss against RSL. And the 2 teams played against each other as well, which they tied, but I'll get into that in a second. Going based off of your last comments, I have a feeling I know which direction you're leaning because head-to-head, these 2 teams played each other in CCL at the start of the season, and LAFC dominated them. 3-0 away win for LAFC and a 3-0 home win for LAFC. In the regular season, Vancouver did battle back, though, pretty well. 3-2 away win for Vancouver. And then, as mentioned, played towards the end of the season again with Vancouver at home, and it was 1-1. So, in my opinion, the signs were pointing towards LAFC, and that's the direction I've went. I think LAFC take this one 2-0. But considering the head-to-head form has definitely favored Vancouver at the end of the season, I could definitely see an argument being made for Vancouver, but I think LAFC are a bit more experienced in the playoffs. I think their home record will help them in the 2 home games in this series. So I think they squeak it out ahead of Vancouver.
You don't know anything about me. That's a shame. I have gone with Vancouver in this position.
Wow. Okay.
LAFC. Here is the list of LAFC goal scorers. Denny Bwanga, 20. Carlos Vela, 9. Ryan Hollingshead, 4. They're a one-man team. Carlos Vela, 9 goals, 7 assists. In his last 10 games, zilch. 0 goals, and I think he has 2 assists. He is not performing at the level recently that you would expect of them, and LA is having trouble closing out games. I now have a list of 7 games here that they have 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss. And yes, as you mentioned, not the easiest fixture run, but this is the playoffs. You don't have easy fixtures anymore. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins over the last 18. 5 wins over the last 18 games. It's I mean, and you can jump that 7 out of 20 if you want, right? 35% win rate. It worries me. And a lot of them were at home, dropping points at home, which is never a great look, right? So to me, I think it is going to be a Brian White and Ryan Gauld versus Denny Bwanga just shootout. And I think Vancouver is going to find a way to do it. And really, it may just be for nothing more than the fact that MLS loves a good first round insanity run. And I think this is where you get it. So I think Vancouver wins this one over LAFC and moves on simply because they'll find a way to game plan around shutting down a Buanga and shutting down a Vela who hasn't been great over the last 10 games. And I'm also really, really long overdue for a Steve Cherundolo complaint about roster rules and spending limits. So I'm hoping we can get that sooner rather than later.
If it were as easy as stopping one man on LAFC, teams would have figured it out by now, but they haven't. So,
Well, they have, haven't they? Right? 5 wins in the last 20. They have.
I mean, Vancouver couldn't because Bouanga scored against them last game.
Sure. And now they know how to stop them.
Do they?
Listen, just because you didn't pick them this year and you picked them 2 years ago doesn't mean now you just forget about them. Remember, they're still there.
Did I pick Vancouver 2 years ago?
You picked them as like your hot take to make the playoffs.
Was I right?
Probably not. You're never right.
That's not true. I was right on San Jose this year.
You don't know anything.
Okay.
But what I do know is we need to move on. And we need to move on to Seattle versus Dallas. Another good matchup here with Seattle in second place, 53 points, 7 wins at home, 7 wins away, versus a Dallas team that has 46 points in 7th place and has 7 wins at home, 4 wins away. I am once again going with the underdog here. I'm taking Dallas in the 7th spot to move on over Seattle. And here's why. It was just announced that Seattle has I'm sorry, not Seattle. Nico Ladero specifically has played his final game with Seattle in the regular season. That he will be done after this year. We mentioned it at the start that this is kind of their last chance to go on a big run with the team that they have before the Stephen Fry, the Nico Ladero, the João Paulos, those guys start to move on and phase their way out of this team. And I think it ends prematurely. It was very similar to when we were doing our predictions for the World Cup that I said there was going to be one team that everybody had the lights on, and at the end of the first round, at the end of the group stage, the headline's going to read "So and so falls short in final run," and that was Uruguay. And I said Uruguay was going to fall short. They had all the pieces. They wouldn't get out of the group. They did. Here, and they didn't. Excuse me. Here, I think is the same thing. I think it's always going to be Ladero on his last run, Ladero on his last run, Ladero on his last run. And I think they trip up and I think they lose in a best of 3 here. They're both relatively okay, home and away. So I think it's a very closer matchup than you think. I think a lot of stuff in the West is closer than you're gonna think. And I think that having, one of the big things for me was Dallas had a lot of the losses in their loss column when they were missing Areola to injury, when they were missing Ferreira to international duty. Those types of games hurt them and dropped them down the standings. Here, I think with a full complement of players, I think Dallas can take it to them. So I'm going Dallas over Seattle, 7-2.
I think you're picking too many upsets here.
You can never pick too many upsets, friend.
You can pick too many upsets. So yeah, you kind of talked about their records already, but Seattle, not the strongest home team, not awful either. Only 4 losses at home. Seem to find ways to not lose at home, and they're a strong away team. I think they're good defensively. They know how to find a goal when they need to. The concern for me with Dallas is that they just tie a lot of games. They had 13 draws this season, which is second most in the league. And once you get to the playoffs, ties just don't mean anything anymore. It's a situation just to get you into extra time. And considering a best of 3 series where there is no extra time, you're going right to penalties. And in that case, I'm backing Stefan Fry. The guy knows how to get it done in those big moments in the playoffs. He's done it time and time again for this team. And I know that he's a bit older than when he was originally making those saves, but I think he still got it in him to make the necessary saves in the clutch moments to move Seattle on. So I think Seattle locks it down at home, plays good defense, finds the goal that they need. And then I think their strong away record helps them go to Dallas and win game 2 as well. So I think Seattle goes through winning the first 2 games. Just because I really do think it will be tight between them, even if Seattle does win 2-0 in the series. I just think that Seattle's a bit more adept in the clutch moments in the playoffs than Dallas would be.
You mentioned that ties don't matter in the playoffs, and I disagree with you there, especially in this home thing. If you can go away from home, get a draw, find a way to get yourself to penalties, anything can happen. Which is why I'm liking Dallas here, because I think that if they find a way to do it, Fry can only come up massive so many times. They can sneak at least one away. If they have to go away 2 games out of the 3, assuming that they win their home game, of course.
Which
and
is
they
a big
need,
assumption.
Which is, yeah, absolutely. But if they can, or even if when they're at home, they need to find a way to get themselves a draw late in the game, they can I believe that they can pull it. Truthfully, I do. So, to me, having draws is a good thing. Same thing with Dallas too. Vancouver as well. Vancouver find ways to get draws, and I think that's a massive part of this home series. When you move into the semifinals and the finals, that comes. I think your point becomes valid. But when you're in a best of 3 series, being able to get yourself an extra chance in a penalty shootout that anything could happen is a massive trait. So that's where I'm going with it.
Well, I would agree with you if the opponent's goalkeeper wasn't someone who's been able to be successful many, many times with big saves in the playoffs. We will have to wait and see, though.
Listen, like I said, guys, Connor's going to do some boring loser stuff, and I'm going to tell you what's really right. So when you're making your brackets for our challenge, you know what to do.
The opposite.
Shall we move over?
Andrew's telling you that's what you should do.
Shall we move over?
Yeah.
Or do you want to finish the West completely?
No. Let's go to the East now.
All right. We'll start Cincinnati versus Red Bull for both of us. We both picked the same one there. So give me an idea of what you think is going to happen.
I mean, I think FCC wins. I'll just tell you right off the bat. I think Red Bull were lucky to make the playoffs, as you were talking about. I think the magic runs out against a real team like FCC, a team that is 13-2-2 at home. FCC is playing 2 out of the 3 games at home. I don't care what kind of team Red Bull looks like on the road. A team that's able to get 13 wins at home in the regular season is just going to be almost impossible to beat, even in the playoffs. So form-wise, Red Bull have the better record, but FCC are still pretty strong form coming in. 3 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss. And head-to-head has been tight, but FCC have got 2 wins over Red Bull's 1. No home wins, I believe, or no regular time home wins, I believe, for either team. Both teams won on the road, and then FCC won in penalties in the US Open Cup. But I think that home record is just going to be too much for Red Bull to overcome. And I think Red Bull are not a strong home team. FCC are decent away, 7-3-7. They actually just don't lose much on the road. So I think FCC comes in and sweeps Red Bull.
I got something for you.
Yeah.
It's your bottle of Haterade.
Oh yeah. Thanks for finding that for me.
So I got it for you because here's what's going to actually happen.
Red Bull hater.
Here's what's going to happen. All right. 2022 MLS Cup playoffs. They beat us at our home turf after Lewis Morgan scored a screamer and then hurt himself celebrating and had to be removed. And then we got torched. 2023 U.S. Open Cup. Lost on penalties. It's revenge season. It's comeback season. And the boys are absolutely buzzing because Tom Barlow scored a goal in the last 3 games, which means we cannot be stopped. 3 wins in our last 3. As I mentioned in the last segment, I guess you could call it, getting draws is super important here. And if there's one thing that Red Bull know how to do, it's defend. Out of all the teams that have made the playoffs this year, only one team has, in the Eastern Conference, I'll just keep it at that, has conceded less goals than us. And it's the team we beat this weekend, Nashville. Cincinnati has given up the same amount of goals as we have. So has Orlando. Everybody else has conceded more. Red Bull are going to Red Bull the heck out of this series, and they are going to sit down, defend like their life depends on it, play either for counterattack wins or penalties. And I think that they get through on penalties. So I'm taking Red Bull to get their revenge in the first round, because the other thing, number 1 seeds do not do well in the playoffs.
Because they had a bye previously.
Outside of LAFC last year, the last team to win the Shield and the Cup double happened in like 2011? Question mark? LAFC Cup. Let's do a quick check here. Team also won Supporters Shield. Sorry, 2017, the treble team. That of course, and before that it was 2011. So it's not a common trend. Those teams do not find success in the MLS Cup playoffs, regardless of the setup, right? I know you just made a little comment about the bye or whatever. Don't care, didn't ask. When teams win the Shield, they don't, because the system is not set up to reward the best teams. We know this. I've made this comment ever since we started this podcast 3 years ago. This MLS Cup playoff never, ever, ever rewards the teams that deserve it, outside of very rare occasions. I mean, 2021, Portland versus New York City, they were both like 6 seeds, right? Like you're very rarely going to find success there unless you're a very, very, very lucky team. And I think that their luck has run out. It's Red Bull season. Give me the Red Bulls over FCC. And then just hook it right to my veins, you know?
I feel like you have this very strong sense that all these lower seed teams can just go in, park the bus, defend across a best of 3 series, and then just win every time in penalties.
I didn't say every team.
That's unrealistic.
I picked St. Louis and I picked Houston. What do you mean every lower seed team?
You picked 3 lower seeds so far to win, and I feel like every single time has been on the conversation of I think they can win it in penalties. assuming that they can just bunker down, get to penalties, and then just win all their games like through penalties and parking the bus. When I
Sorry,
think
did you
that's
not
just
say the same
highly
thing about
unrealistic.
Seattle? Did you not say the same thing about Seattle?
I
Saying,
said
"Oh,
okay. I
I
said
think
about
that he
one
can."
team. I said
Oh my
about
God!
one
Now,
team.
now we're playing. Now we're playing. If it works for me, I didn't ask. I don't care. Red Bulls to the moon. Get wrecked, nerd.
Well, I don't want to say anything because I know the podcast jinx, and I'm not trying to put that on FCC. So
Take
I'm going
the
to leave it
bait.
at that.
Take the bait.
Nope, leaving it at that.
All right, let's move on then before I continue to put you in your place. I'm also manifesting that at some point I can get home and go to one of these playoff games because Red Bull's not going to sell out. So if Red Bull can guarantee themselves a playoff game in early November, I can make a trip and do it. So manifest with me.
Yeah, I
Um,
will. That would be fantastic to have you go watch them get knocked out
you
live in
you'll
front of
come
me.
with me, of course.
Oh no, no chance.
No, you definitely will. You, me, Matt, and Pops. We'll all go as a crew. We'll get Jason involved too. 5 of us. We'll be a quarter of the fan support.
We really will. We'll be all the fans support. What do you mean?
Oh man! All right, mark it in your calendars. We're gonna do it. But as we prepare, let's move on. Philly, New England. Um, I am not digging New England vibe, man. Um, really good at home is Philly and New England. Philly's better on the road than New England is. I just there's New England's got such a bad vibe around them right now. They are just where are we here? 3 losses and a draw in their last 6. Ever since that whole Bruce Arena thing came out, it just feels so bad. I've got Philly taking this in 2 and them getting out, hitting the reset button next year.
I feel like you're being a little too harsh on New England here, but
Oh,
I do.
now you want to pick the underdog and tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Go, please go ahead.
Since when is the higher seed the underdog? I have
Oh, so you're
Philly going through. I'll
good,
have you know,
man. So why did you start? Oh, you're the
because
worst.
I think you're making it sound like it's gonna be a blowout. Philly's gonna walk them and then move on to the next round, but I think it's gonna be Philly's form going into the playoffs right now is not great. Granted, neither is New England's, like you said. New England's form is not great either. But Philly's only got 1 win in their last 5, and credit, they had a really tough end of the season schedule where I think all 5 games were against playoff teams. But one of those games was a head-to-head between New England and Philly. I think it was the last game of the season, and New England won that game 2-1. So I'm not fully counting out New England. I think based on both teams' home records, this is going to go home win, home win, home win. And I think Philly takes it because they're the higher seed, pretty much. Essentially because they had a 4-goal difference better because both of them had 15 wins this season as well. I agree with you that I think there's there's been a bit of, I would say, locker room turmoil going on in New England the entire second half of the year. But I mean, the team still has 12 wins, 1 loss at home. I think they get it done at home, but I think their away record kills them here. So I do
I don't know.
also have Philly going through, but I think it's closer than you're making it out to be.
I don't know, man. I think with everything going on, this is like how Red Bull would get themselves knocked out. Like cruising at the top of the table, doing everything right, and then all of a sudden your star goalkeeper wants to leave, you don't let him leave. Your manager gets ousted for whatever he did. Everybody hates everybody, and they bounce in the first round when they have the most potential to win anything ever. Like it just feels like that is setting itself up. I think it's going to be bad, but that's just me. And Philly know how to get it done in the playoffs too. By the way, Jim Curtin.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Let's move on. Columbus against your what do we call it? Dumpster fire of a team? Yeah, let's call it a dumpster fire of a team. And I'll let you go first here.
No need to call us a dumpster fire. That was unnecessary. One of our teams is directly into the playoffs. The other one has to get through in the Mickey Mouse playoff system. Yeah, exactly. He has no comeback for that one. So home and away record for Columbus, 12-1-4 at home. They are unbelievably dominant at home. That I would say is definitely a fortress. One loss all year there. 4-8-5 on the road is definitely a lot weaker. Definitely seems to be a weak point for the Columbus team. Atlanta, pretty similar story. Um, 10-3-4 at home. Very, very good at home. Not quite as good as Columbus, but still very, very good. 3-6-8 on the road. Very much not a road team. That is very clear based on that. Form going into the playoffs, neither have really been in great form. But again, I think both teams had relatively tough schedules to end the year. Atlanta is 1 win, 1 loss, 3 draws. Columbus is 2 wins, 3 draws. So not a lot of losses between the two of them, but again, not a lot of wins either. So pretty tight. One of those 5 games was a head-to-head between the two. Atlanta hosted and game finished in a draw. And then the first matchup between the two of them was the 6-1 beatdown by Columbus at the start of the year. I think this is going to be another situation of home win, home win, home win. And I think Columbus takes it 2-1. I think Atlanta were very lucky in this case that Columbus will be hosting in the first game because Almada is going to be suspended for that first game. If it was Atlanta hosting first game, then then Columbus in the second, it's a sweep in my opinion. It's 2-0, it's done. But considering I think it would be tough for Atlanta even at full strength to winning in Columbus, that's the perfect game for Almada to be suspended if he were to be suspended. So I think it'll be 2-1. I think Columbus will be able to take care of us pretty easily, honestly, in my opinion. But I think we'll still get the home game win.
I just want to put it out there, by the way. First of all, you're not picking nearly enough upsets. It's disappointing.
Yeah, it's a best of 3 series. I don't think there will be as many upsets.
And for me being like, oh, they're gonna win everything in penalties. Yours is just like home win, home win, home win, home win, home win, home win, home win. Like,
oh yeah, imagine me picking the teams that have won like 11, 12 games at home this season. Wow, it's crazy to believe that they'll win again at home.
Be fun. You're boring, and I don't like.
I'm trying to be correct, not fun.
Yeah, see, this is why you don't bring in views to the podcast. This is why it's me, and then you are just my guest.
It's you making a fool of yourself, and then me giving the actual correct analysis.
I've also got Columbus going through 57 points, 3 wins, 3 draws versus Atlanta United, 2 wins, 3 draws, 1 loss. But that Almada missing link is going to be a massive, massive problem for them. Georgios Giacomakis is an animal, but he is matched play for play by this guy Cucho Hernandez, and he's got better weapons around him than Atlanta does. Also, if we're I think both goalkeepers are going to be suspect in this one. Brad Guzan is either unbelievable out of his mind, and that's usually only when he plays Red Bull, and then he's just kind of mid. And then Patrick Schulte is hit or miss at times as well. But I think the midfield of the Crew wins that battle against the midfield of Atlanta. And the striker, I think because of that, the striker output is going to be a Cucho win over a Atlanta win. So you hit all the other pretty good points there, but I'm going to take Columbus over there as well.
Oh yeah, what Cucho is about to do to Gazan is probably going to be illegal to put on the internet. I mean, you could argue Brad. I mean, listen, we should have. I don't want to dive down a random tangent, but I'm going to for a little bit because I've heard enough Red Bull tangents from you. But we should have moved on from Brad probably like 2 years ago at this point. I mean, he's 39. And what was our solution at the start of the year? Oh, let's just go bring in some more goalkeepers that are like 30 plus years old. I mean, I didn't mind bringing in Diop, but bringing in Westberg, who's like 35 plus, I think, as well. It was like, what's the plan here? And then sure enough, Brad's not what he used to be. And his, dare I bring out the favorite stat? PSXG.
Do it.
He's second worst in the entire league. So I'm trying to find some of his other stats. I'm struggling to find it for some reason. Oh, never mind. I found it. Yeah. He's been brutal this year. 62% save percentage is awful. Plus being second worst in the PSXG plus minus. Cucho's going to run circles around this defense. It's going to be a bloodbath. I just think that we have the home advantage, and I know Atlanta's really tough on the road, especially in the playoffs. That I think Almada can at least give like a nice farewell to the Atlanta fans before dipping out this offseason.
You think he's gone this offseason?
Oh, he's totally gone.
That's not a conversation for now, but I don't know if he's gone if they don't hit the right price. Anyways, let's move on to Orlando, Nashville to finish this up. I go first here. America runs on Duncan. Duncan McGuire controls
I like
Atlanta.
that. Nice.
Duncan McGuire puts Orlando through on his back. If we're gonna go with some more stats, it's 2 versus 7. Orlando City on 63 points, 4 wins on the bounce right now versus a Nashville side that's got 3 draws, two losses, and a win. I did mention that being, getting draws is good, and they almost got a draw at a Red Bull, which would have knocked us out. But to me, I think Orlando City's more complete, right? And it hurts because I want my boy Dax to do good things, but Facundo Torres, Duncan McGuire up front are dangerous. And then you're looking at a back line now with Antonio Carlos has been great. A defender of the year candidate, if you're asking me my true opinion, in Robin Janssen. And then Pedro Gallese, the octopus in goal, I believe is his nickname, with Mauricio Pereira behind him, by the way, who hasn't had the best year, only 4 assists, 0 goals. But he can make things happen, right? And then they've got a good combination of number 6s as well in Araujo and Cartagena. It just feels like a much more complete overall side. You're working in Ivan Angulo in there as well. Rodrigo Schlegel can always throw the gloves on in a pinch, as we know. And it just feels a little bit more complete. Whereas, Nashville is a good defensive side. We've talked about that from the beginning. But it's Hani Mukhtar and it's Hani Mukhtar. So if you can shut him down, which I believe that Orlando defense can, you can find ways to be successful. Now, Sam Surridge only has 500 minutes this year. So I think if he can get on, it changes things a little bit. But even then, it's really, and I saw Fafa Pico get hurt against, not Fafa Pico, sorry, Randall Leal get hurt as well against Red Bull, the little bit that I was able to catch. It just feels like there are a lot of decent pieces in here that may not necessarily all fit together. You got Jacob Schaffelberg, who's rapid off the bench, and you got Hani Mukhtar is going to do good things, but it just feels like Orlando's a bit deeper, a bit stronger, in a bit better form. And then, we haven't really brought back up recently the home and away thing. Orlando's 9 wins at home, 9 wins away. Nashville 9 wins at home, 4 away. Orlando know how to get it done at home and away from home. I'm going Orlando here. I think it'll be close, but I think Orlando wins 2-0.
I am right on board the same train. I
Of
think
course you are, because they're a higher seed.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest things for me for Orlando, and I really hate to give them credit, but they are the most well-rounded team in home and away record in the entire league. They're the best away team in the entire league, and they're very strong at home as well. I think that's going to be a massive advantage for them, certainly in the best of 3 series. But I think it'll be an advantage even throughout the rest of the playoffs, because I almost feel like where they play doesn't matter. They are in there to get a result, whether they're playing at home or playing away. And their form coming in has been fantastic. As you talked about, 4 wins, 1 draw in their last 5. Maybe not the best level of competition, but a couple good wins in there. One of them being Nashville, in Nashville. Whereas Nashville's coming in definitely worse form. 1 win, 2 draws, 2 losses is not great. Granted, it is definitely a tougher level competition than Orlando was playing. Nashville had a very tough end of the season schedule. But like you said, there's not easy games anymore. So you've got to be able to beat the tough teams. And they haven't been able to do that in their last 5. I think Orlando definitely has the advantage here. I think they also win the series 2-0. And yeah, nothing else to add than that.
Wonderful.
All right.
All right, and that'll do it then. That is round 1 predictions done. To save you guys from listening to another 2-hour episode, because we've had a couple of those in the recent past, we're going to leave it here. And what we're going to do is we'll come back before the conference semifinals and give our full predictions on how the rest of the playoffs will finish up. So we'll let round one play out. That'll end on November 12th. And then before the November 25th conference semifinal kickoff, we will have predictions out for the rest of the playoffs. So make sure you subscribe for that episode to come out. And really what you want to stick around for, make sure you subscribe for our next episode, which is going to be looking back on some predictions that we made at the beginning of the year and maybe laughing, maybe crying, maybe putting blame on Connor, probably putting blame on Connor, and going
When do you not
from
blame
there.
me?
If you want to hear why I have to blame Connor, make sure you tune in for the next episode. Make sure you're following us on all forms of social media as well: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, which I just started posting on again. And we will be interacting with you there as well. I'm trying to catch up. I'm almost done with episode 159 edits for our TikTok. So only 30 more to go to catch up, which is great. And then we are looking forward to interacting with you there. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.